Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker, coach, and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal. This transformative experience has led me to create a podcast that is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear real life and authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the disparities they face, and how they actively combat them? If you answered yes to any of those questions, I want to start by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I am happy to introduce my guest, Ayelet Shipley. Ayelet is another product of networking through a guest on my other podcast series, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. Ayelet received her undergraduate degree in psychology from Elon University and is in her second year of her master's in social work program at New York University. Having worked in the mental health field for years, she has a deep understanding of working with adults and children experiencing mental health problems, as well as working with individuals with special needs. Ayelet is extremely passionate about tackling these issues that can often control someone's life. She is also the author of Anxiety Secrets Toolbox Workbook. This is the essential foundation which includes exercises and daily tools to gain control over your anxiety and panic attacks and live life on your own terms. Ayelet has spent the last 12 years struggling with depression and anxiety, and even remembers a time back in college where she couldn't even get out of bed because the anxiety was getting so bad. She decided to do something about her situation while also helping thousands of other people along the way. Allow me to please introduce Ayelet Shipley. Ayelet, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Would you mind please introducing yourself to our listeners and share part of your story before we dive in and get going? And please share your role relating to mental health.
Yeah, so I am 23 years old and I am in my second year of graduate school as a social worker to be a therapist. I'm actually I'll be done in a month. So my role is as a coach and as a therapist for people with anxiety, but coming at it from a different standpoint of someone who uses self-disclosure a lot and vulnerability to help others to acknowledge their own struggles that they've been through, because I believe that sharing and being open and showing up who you authentically are is one of the biggest ways to combat the mental health struggles that a lot of people go through. And I know it was a massive part of my journey as well.
Well, I love how you're open because I think communicating with people is half the battle. And when you're open to having a conversation, you can share these thoughts with other people and connect with them. I think that helps so much.
Yeah, it was a big step for me, but I think it was the thing that transformed my life the most out of anything.
Ayelet, thank you for sharing all of that. And on each episode, I share a mental health related story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they're healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. For today's episode, I will introduce the mental health story of someone who has also struggled with anxiety, depression, and Oprah Winfrey. Honestly, it's hard to view someone like Oprah even having one dull moment throughout her day, but this TV mogul told us all that she has battled depression. Her first experience with depression was after her film adaptation of Toni Morrison's Beloved premiered at the box office back in 1998. She actually starred in this movie flop, but also had bought the rights to the book along with aiding the film's production to get to theaters. She said, quote, "I knew nothing about box office projections or weekend openings, and so began my long plunge into food and depression and suppressing all my feelings. She went on to add, quote, I actually started to think, maybe I really am depressed. Maybe it's more than I feel bad about this. I felt like I was behind a veil. I felt like what many people had described over the years on my show, and I could never imagine it. What's depression? Why don't you just pick yourself up? Said her depression lasted for 6 weeks. Ayelet, what did you take away from that story or her public statements on mental health?
I think it's so interesting that she said, maybe I really am depressed. It's more than just I feel bad about this, because I think a lot of us go through life where we're just like, well, is this just me? Is this a thing? And we don't really know how to take that. And if we can't name things a lot of the time, it's even scarier for us. Just like right now, we're all going through something and we're like, we can't really name what we're feeling right now because we don't necessarily know. So helping to name those feelings and figure out what it really is a huge part of being able to start coping and dealing with anxiety or depression or any of the other mental health struggles that we all go through.
Especially someone like Oprah with such a huge platform, for her to make a statement like this has to, help so many people.
Yeah, when you know that someone else is suffering and you're not alone, and people that you would never expect to, it makes it almost like okay for you, which I think is a huge thing.
Yeah, definitely relating to people helps so, so much. But Ayla, thank you for sharing all that. Something I do on the show is called the main event. On each episode, my guest and I will go over this series of 6 questions, which only slightly varies depending on if my guest is speaking on their own or others' mental health today. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Many would agree that the more common or at least talked about types of mental health disparities are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia disorders. What areas did you come across the most?
Um, I think that generalized anxiety disorders are massive right now. I definitely come across that the most when I'm seeing clients and have been working in the field for so long. And I think that it's only going to get significantly higher as the years go on.
What factors do you attribute to you think seeing this such a large increase?
So I think my generation was born into one where you're on social media all the time. So you're seeing the highlight reel of someone's life, the perfect pictures. And I think that goes into the anxiety thinking that we often face is, what if? Like, what if this is happening? Why isn't this happening to me? And it's all the futuristic thinking that is often the source of anxiety, because anxiety ends when you are in the full present moment. So it creates all of this inner dialogue in your head. Um, and so I do think social media is a huge part of that, as well as we, I live in New York City. So the world we live in is like, you just go and you go and you go. And I think going without feeling is a huge part of anxiety as well. And not wanting to show that side of you that many people see as weakness, which is why I think that anxiety can be so high.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Social media is a crazy world when you open those apps, and I do my best to do my posting and kind of make sure I'm not on there too long for my business because I know the tunnel it can go down.
Yeah, it can. And just like the fear around posting because you only should show perfect pictures and all of that stuff that so many people face, and it's not real. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a
That's
big
why I enjoy
problem.
the podcast so much more because people know these are authentic, uncut. There's okay to have some static. There's okay to have, something in the background because we're not taking 100 Instagram pictures at once to get one. It's a great point you made.
Yeah,
But Ella,
I
when did
think
you?
that's super important.
I agree with you. When did you first decide that a career relating to mental health was going to be the right one for you? Please paint that picture for us.
So it's actually something that I've always known since I was a little girl. My whole family is in the mental health industry. Everyone is a therapist pretty much in my family. My mom, my aunts, um, my grandma, who's like 90 something, was even a life coach. Um, and so I have just always known that I was meant to be a therapist. I was always empathic, and I didn't know the exact path that life was gonna have for me in terms of this. I didn't expect to go into an entrepreneurial space and bring my message larger, but, um, from the time I was, like, 12 years old, I had been volunteering each summer at therapeutic horseback riding centers for kids with special needs, people with mental health disorders, and that has just always been a huge part of my life. And I never questioned it. It was never anything else.
I love how you found a passion and you just stuck with it. I think that's such an important lesson for people listening on of how important it is to just do something you like and success will follow you. I mean, that's just great stuff.
Yeah, people would be like, "Oh, okay, like, I yell at the therapist." Like, it's always been me, and there's been no question. I'm open to, like, the path of it changing, of how it happens, of how I help people, but the actual path of being a therapist and helping people that go through these struggles has always been a huge part of me.
Yeah, and I really commend that. But now that you have such experience in the mental health world, you're in school, you have your personal experiences. What advice can you give to our listeners as what may be considered a potential early sign that they may be starting to develop some kind of mental disparity?
So, I think it really depends on the person. I think if you're starting to question your own struggles and you're like, why is this happening? Like, what is this? There's something going on.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that it's anything to be so scared about. It just means you might need to do some research, you might need to ask for help, and learn some skills to cope with it. But the moment someone starts thinking like, maybe this is why am I waking up with a pit in my stomach? Why is my heart racing every time I feel like I'm going to be late? Something like that, when it interferes with your everyday life, that's when you know something is happening. If it's something that isn't interfering with your life at all, and you're just like, okay, whatever, then let it be. But when you're really like we always say, if it becomes a problem for you in learning or living every day, then that's when you know something's up.
Interesting. A lot of people think that if they have a bad day, they're depressed. Or I say it's okay. I often say it's okay to be normal, and it comes up a lot. What's your take on that? If you just how do you get through like that push of getting through a couple bad days? It's not really a mental disparity. You're just going through some hard times.
Yeah, I mean, everyone goes through hard times. We and it also, you could go into a depression once and never have it again. I'm someone that has gone through it many of times, so I tend to know when I'm starting to cycle into one because I've seen it, but it took years and years of that. There are days where I'm like, "Wait, this is a bad day." I don't feel me. And I'm like, "What if I am spiraling?" And that can scare me. And so what I do is I use all the tools I have to get out of that to try to, like, make the day better. But I also know that if I'm still, like, watching TV, if I'm still having an appetite, if it's not crippling me, it's just a bad day, and we're all allowed to have them. No one is saying that every day is gonna be good or great. It's just a matter of life.
I love it. A lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves, especially nowadays. So I think that's great, great advice for everybody listening on. So thank you for that. But if you could pick three here, and I say only three because I want the three most important things our listeners can do on a daily or short-term basis, what things would you recommend to everybody to improve their overall mental health?
So, I think a huge thing is starting your day off right, and that means different things for different people. And so I really think that gratitude allows someone to be in the present moment.
Okay.
And so I start my day off with three things I'm grateful for, and one thing that could make this day good. Doesn't have to be amazing, but make this day good. And to accomplish that, because we want wins, we want things to make us feel good. We need that validation for ourselves. So I think that, like, starting the day off so that you understand like what you need to do to feel good about yourself is a really good way to improve your mental health. And the gratitude part of it, your brain can only pick up on a certain amount of information. And when you start your day off with that information, you're looking out for it more. So
Right.
you're picking up on the gratitude more. So I think that's really big. So it's number one is starting your day off right.
I love that one, to be
I think
honest.
another thing,
Love it.
yeah,
I love it, 'cause I've had a doctor, and so she's like, "If you just start thinking what you're grateful for and you pay attention to it, like you just said, you'll notice a lot more things that are going well for you than you really gave yourself credit for."
exactly. It just your brain can only pick up on a certain amount of information, and it's primed to pick up on information that we are paying attention to.
Yes. Love
So
it.
that's number one. Number two is the importance of learning breathing. I am someone that when I start going through anxiety, um, breathing is what brings me back to the present moment. And so what I do is I breathe in for 4, hold for 6, and out for 7. And everyone has different breathing routines, and that's just one that it works for me. When I was backstage before I spoke at Funnel Hacking Live in front of 5,000 people to tell them my story about anxiety and depression, that was like what got me grounded and right there, because obviously I was anxious.
That's an incredible
Um,
accomplishment, 5,000 people. That's a big audience.
from someone who has a fear of public speaking, yeah, it was a big one. um, yeah, it was crazy, but it made a whirlwind of difference in my life. Like I can't even. I'm so grateful for that moment, and that is something that I consistently go back to remembering, and I'm always grateful for. Um, and another thing to improve your overall mental health is sharing,
Yeah, talk about
letting
that.
someone else, yeah, letting someone else know that you're going through this takes the chains off of you, I say, because like we are I at least know that I was living in fear of my story, living in fear of what I was going through because I didn't want someone else to know. I thought who could date a broken person, who would be friends with a broken person, who would marry or hire a broken person. It's all of these things that was going through me, and it made me feel like something was wrong with me
Mhm.
until I started to open up to people. And then it helped me realize that this is okay. This is normal. People go through this, as well as it's not just on you. You're able to talk about it. And I think sharing and being open and vulnerable is a massive part of it. So I think just finding at least like one person who's safe to talk to, and it might not be a close friend. It might need to be a therapist. It might need to be someone who's not in your direct circle. For me, it was in my direct circle. Then it grew, obviously. But that was the starting place for started to improve my own mental health.
Well, I like the way you put that, because something for me, when I had my traumatic brain injury, something I wish I encountered more often was people one-on-one talking that had traumatic brain injuries, hearing it out of the horse's mouth of exact, because you hear from doctors and books and texts, what may happen. But if I heard from someone actually experiencing what I went through, I'm blessed that I had a miraculous recovery, but I also think that it could have even been quicker if I had some one-on-one advice, like you're saying.
Yeah, if someone could just be honest and open about it, telling you the truth, and so that you know what could possibly happen or what to expect, it like that takes away anxiety and improves your mental health too. So
We're working together, I think, in a lot of ways, in breaking these stigmas, so people are more open and are more communicative and helping others through their story, because you don't realize the power your story has until you share your story.
yeah.
And I think, you experience that in that big stage, and look how much incredible things you've been accomplishing. I'm excited to see what else you got, but those are great short-term initiatives to create a more positive mental health space. Let's help our audience now with some longer-term commitments. What are 2 long-term commitments our listeners can make to create a healthier mindset?
So it's interesting. I think the short term goes into the long term because I think everything is about taking it day by day. And I think that the long term can be really scary for people. So if you take it day by day and take the short term and turn it into a long term, that's what really goes. So committing to doing these things for a month, 2 months, 3 months. Habits, if you do something for 21 days, that turns into a long-term solution. Like creating a schedule for yourself in which you are committing to doing this literally changes your life in the total, and you don't want to go back. So doing it for the short term, when you find things that work, end up turning into the long term.
Yeah, I like that
So I think that's
consistency.
a big thing.
It's all
Yeah,
consistency, and you start to
consistency.
replicate that. Like the way you put it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things that work for me, the exercise, whether it's, elliptical or working out, like I take a mental health break. I mean, I take mental health breaks throughout the day. Some people take full days off, weeks off. For me, I like being a workaholic for sure, but I also make sure to not burn out, and ways I do that are things like you're saying, over time, they become habitual.
Exactly. I think, like, little mental health breaks, whether I mean, I know that I need Saturdays, like, to not to not do work. And as entrepreneurs, and as everyone right now, everyone's at home right now, so
That's
we
crazy.
all
Yeah.
there's no escaping it. And learning that you need time off so that you don't burn out. Because even if you think that your body won't, your mind manifests itself in your body and it will, and your body will shut down from it. Whether that means like getting sick. Like I know that when I'm the most stressed out and the most anxious, like my body reacts by becoming sick because even though I was going along with these things and doing it, my mind literally told my body to stop.
I love the way you're putting that in my body. I get these signals. I know when I'm feeling when I'm overworking myself for a few days, my body sends me signals. When I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety, my body sends me signals. And I think that does unfortunately come with a lot of dealing with it. But recognizing the situation, recognizing your body, I think you make another great point there.
Yeah, and being in tune with your body is also one of those long-term initiatives that you can do, by like committing to yourself that you're gonna stay in tune to what your body is telling you and listen to it. I talk about leaning into feelings a lot, but leaning into what your body is saying is massive.
Yeah. Now this question, I'm really excited for you to share with our listeners because I know how much great stuff you're working on. What are some ways you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? I know you got some cool stuff going on now as well. I would love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah, so I have this huge, long-term goal of changing the conversation around mental health, changing it from mental illness to just struggles we go through. And that's not to say that it's not diagnosable. You don't need medicine because I believe in it. Like, I believe that sometimes you do need medicine. But changing it from being something we're ashamed of to another part of us. Like, I have learned that depression and anxiety can be my superpowers. So, depression allows me to feel deeper, and it's made me an empath. Like it makes me the person I am today. And it comes with downsides. Like, do I not want to experience depression? Of
Mhm.
course, like I don't
Yeah.
ever want to, but I have, and I know what can come out of it. And that also is helping people and helping them understand that this is just a part of you and there are positives that come out of it. And it's not something to be ashamed of because it makes you who you truly are. And then once you're broken, like once your chains are broken, like with that from that story around you, you can step into the person you were meant to become because you're no longer living in shame and in fear. So in changing this conversation, it comes with being open. And I have a podcast, which started my whole journey, but I have the Anxiety Secrets Toolbox, which it helps people cope every single day. For me, that's what it does. It gives you real workbook exercises. Stay consistent with it. And so for the future, it's changing the conversation in terms of groups of people, conferences, um, speaking engagements, all of these things. The most important thing is realizing that if you change one person's life, it'll trickle down. Their life will change, they will impact people. And it's all a matter of exponential growth from yourself. And as long as I keep my voice loud enough for people to hear on social media, on Facebook, and keep coming up with new ways, such as a course and one on one coaching, which I do. Um, those are the ways to change the conversation.
I love it. And I think we also share a common vision here, an idea, I should say, where you're not really judged on what you're doing. It's how many people you can help, how you're helping others. And I love what you're doing because you're really breaking down an important stigma. On an earlier podcast, it came up where what is it going to take to treat your anxiety like a broken arm, or a broken leg where, okay, you need 3 weeks to recover. You need a 3-month recovery period. These are still they're injuries that can be repaired. You can work with them, but for some reason, there's a lot of just negativity surrounding it. So I really, really do commend what you're doing, and that's why I had to have you on the show. So thank you so much, Ayelet. I know our listeners are going to see all the value in your episode today. You spoke from the heart. You gave your personal experience and a professional experience. So I think that's really important. I love the breathing techniques you gave. And I also like how you noted that what works for someone work for everybody. This is what works for me. Everybody is different. And I think that's very important to recognize because people can get discouraged if they get told by a doctor, do this, and it doesn't work. They think that it's their fault. When it's not your fault, you did nothing wrong. Let's find something that works. Let's try something different. I think that's amazing. But it's time for the last word. I do this on my other podcast that's called What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur Too, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something you want to share with everybody listening on that we didn't get to touch on yet today?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is to know that no one is alone in this. Everyone has gone through struggles and trauma and experiences, and it makes us who we are. It is a part of us that only propels us in the future because out of pain comes growth. And we can recognize the suck while we're in it, but that we get through things. Humans are adaptable. That is what we're made to do. We are made to adapt and to survive. So you're not alone, and you will get through it and grow from it. As much as it sucks right now,
You
it
make
gets
a great
better.
point. You're human. We're human. It's going to happen. It's all right. You'll get through
Exactly.
it. Would you mind please sharing your professional social media website or ways for our listeners to follow your endeavors, especially grab your podcast name and all that? Let's get that going.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Get Out of Bed, Out of Your Head, where I just talk super openly and then interview people that have gone through it and professionals in the field and all of that. The Anxiety Secrets Toolbox, which I talked about before, you go to www.anxietysecretstoolbox.com, is where the tools I've acquired over the years are. So all of that. And then I created a Facebook group, which is for people that struggle with anxiety. It's called Thrive Beyond Anxiety. And it's a place for people to not be triggered by what's going on, but to learn the skills and to share openly and vulnerably what we've gone through and be able to like lift each other up because we know what we go through, but we're not going to settle for that life because we can thrive beyond it.
Absolutely.
And so just follow me on Facebook and Instagram and you'll just find me there
Yeah,
talking about it all the time.
I definitely joined that group as soon as I saw the invitation. So I'm very thankful you're doing that because of how many lives you're going to touch at the end of the day. The service you're doing cannot be discounted. You need to be proud of yourself for what you're doing because it is remarkable. But be sure to check out all the social media, her websites, the Toolbox. It's all very valuable. And be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break. And we're on Twitter at Podcast by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. And my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption on Amazon now. But DM me or email me. I want to hear what you think. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.